Hey, right. All right, I've got 9:30, so if you would go ahead and make your way to your seat. We do have David French with us this morning, and want to make sure that we give him as much time as we can as he shares about the mission work that he and his family are doing. Let's start with a word of prayer, and then I'll turn it over to David. Father, I thank you for this morning and for the time that we spent together in this place. And God, I pray that as we hear about the work that we are helping to be done, that you would encourage and strengthen us, and that we can be an encouragement to David as well this morning. And I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be with you all. I'm sorry that Lori's not with me on this trip, but she wanted me to be sure to send your greetings, and my daughter also, working with Karen's kids in Zambia. I talked to her this morning, and she told me to be sure to give you greetings as well. She was here about 18 months ago. Karen was here in the country, and we came by and visited with you all, so she remembers you all fondly and wanted me to be sure to give you greetings on behalf of her. If you're not getting our newsletter, I would really, really love for you to sign up for it. I put some brochures and a sign-up sheet back there, and we send it out by regular mail and by email, and they're different. So, because I can put more, I send out more frequent emails with pictures and even videos. So, if you want to get it that way, it's shorter stories, and it's more for email. And then I have a printed version as well, so sign up for one or both of them. Feel free to do both, because we would love for you to be able to stay informed of the work and to share in our work, and to be praying about things that are going on there. We have Facebook and also a web page, and there's a brochure back there. It's got all that information back there. The yellow one has all the information, so feel free to pick some of those brochures up as well. We've been in Zambia now for 17 years, and despite the pandemic, last year was the best year that we've ever had. I think part of the reason is because it took us several years to learn how to really do this ministry, the first 10 years, and when we moved to our new campus in 2015, we made some major changes that I'll share with you in a minute. And it just feels like, we kind of got the staff in place and know what we're doing, and the training, and now we're seeing some wonderful groups of students that are graduating from our program. And in fact, last November when we had our last graduation, the best students we've ever had, the men and their wives, were the most spiritual minded that we had to graduate. We have three main ministries. The Bible College is, of course, the primary one, and I'm going to spend the most time on it. But first, let me mention our two primary ministries that we're engaged in that you might call humanitarian ministries, because, you can't be in a place like Africa and not respond to people's needs, because they are so great. And so we do have two primary. There's several other things we do, but the primary school is one of those. We have grades K through 7. We have capacity for about 250 students. And we kind of had to start our own school because there's not one in our area, and so there was not a school for the students, their children, the Bible College students, their children, and our staff, their children. There just wasn't a school for them. And then we got 30 to 60 kids that we have on our campus, so we had to start our own school. Then there's a great need in the community for one as well, but not just for just having a school, but there's a real need in Africa for quality education. And if you look at the world rankings economically, you'll see that all of them at the bottom are African. And you would think that Africa would realize if they're ever going to get out of the bottom, they're going to need to put emphasis on education. But they're not. In fact, I think it's getting worse. And a lot of that's due to government corruption and perhaps some decreasing of funding from the Western countries as well, as Africa's kind of pivoting towards China now that doesn't really care about their education. So it's a real need for quality education. So we have tried to create a school that's going to provide some very good education there. And my wife being a school teacher, master's in education, this is kind of her baby, you know. So she works with that. One of the things we did this past year is to hire one of our students. He and his wife were two of the most spiritual-minded students that we had to graduate from our school this past November, in fact. So we hired him to be the campus minister of our primary school, because we not only want to do quality education, but we want to do Christian education. And one of the things that we've noticed in Africa is that the churches of Africa are not doing a very good, and not just Churches of Christ, but kind of across the board, they're not really doing a good job with teaching their children, passing on their faith to their children. Worship services last 2-3 hours, and there's not much for the children. That's a long service for kids. So a lot of parents just leave their kids at home and come to church, and they don't have Sunday schools, and so they're just missing something. And that's really of concern to me, because basically half of the population of Africa is under 18 years of age. So I have become very concerned about the importance of Christian education. So we have done a lot to try to build up our school quality education, but especially the Christian component. Now, several things that our campus minister does, Chris, that he does. One is he works with a daily chapel that we do with our primary school students. We also teach Bible classes we have a class every day with the students. It's Bible. We also, he works with the students that live off campus, going to their homes, working with their families. That's kind of part of our outreach program to the community. And then one very important thing that Chris does, he and his wife, is they coordinate with the Bible college so that our Bible college students and their wives get experience, practical hands-on experience working in the primary school with Christian education. So they teach chapel and Bible classes and go off campus ministering to the families of the students that come to our school. So that's a very important part of our outreach. And so that gives our Bible college students and their wives experience not only as teachers, learning how to be a school teacher, but how to do Christian education and how to work with children and to develop the spiritual life of children. I think that is a very, very important need in Africa right now, because, you know, Africa's gone Christian, big time. And so this is a very important need. I'll say more about that as we go along. Now, this past year, we did an awful lot to try to elevate and develop our primary school. It was one of our main focuses this past year. And several things that we did. One is we hired 6 new teachers, replaced 2 that didn't have enough education. So we now have 12 very good teachers in our primary school, because we want every grade to have its own teacher and its own classroom. In addition to that, we hired an assistant director to work with my wife, Lori, in running the daily operations of the school. We've known Lacondo for 7, 8, 9 years, and he is a very spiritual person, and he's even working on his master's in education, knows how to do administration, and he has really elevated the quality of our primary school this past year. Oh, what's happened there? Okay, let me quickly back up here. What in the world did that? All right. I'm trying to back up here. One of the things we did this past year, in addition, was we built 5 new classrooms. And as I said, that's so every grade will have its own classroom now. And we just finished construction on an auditorium. This is where we can do daily chapel, and we have special events where we bring the families off campus onto our school for special school programs. And again, that's part of our outreach program. And there's kind of a picture of our primary school, so that it's a nice facility that we have there for that. One of the things that we started a few years ago was a lunch program, because we noticed a lot of the students that are coming from off campus are severely malnourished. Zambia happens to be, according to the UN, the most malnourished country in all of Africa. And the reason for that is because they eat very little other than just corn. It only rains 5 months out of the year, and corn is a great crop to grow in the rainy season. You dry it out and you can store it for the 7.5 months where it doesn't rain a drop. And so that means that about 85% of what they eat is nothing but starch. They get very little protein. And so we have a lot of our lethargic. They didn't play at recess. They don't laugh. They were missing school a lot because of being sick so much. And they just weren't performing very well academically. So we started this lunch program, and so for about $12 a day, we feed all of them a lunch that's high in protein and nutrition. And I mean, it didn't take no time, and those kids just perked up, and they started coming alive. They started laughing, playing at recess. They stopped missing so much school, and they actually started doing better academically as well. And I mean, we were just shocked at how big a difference malnutrition has on kids' academic performance. So that's a very popular program that we have because it's very cheap, $12 a day to feed all these kids. It makes a big difference in their life. We love finding ways to make a big difference with very little money. And in Africa, it's one place you can do that because they have almost nothing. So a little bit goes a long way in Africa, and that's one of the ways. Now, another part of our humanitarian ministry is Karen's Kids, which the congregation here is helping very much. In fact, you are our number one contributor to Karen's Kids ministry. So this is a ministry that my daughter Karen, who's now 24, 23, 25, I don't. She keeps changing her age every year. I don't know. I can't keep up with it. But anyway, this is a ministry she started about 8-9 years ago, and it's just basically to save the babies' lives, kids 1 to 3. Now, one more thing, Karen doesn't just work with Karen's Kids, but she has now kind of become our chief administrator. Though Lori and I are spending more time here in the U.S. because the funding needs for our ministry has increased, and so visiting churches, and that has become more important now. And, we have developed the staff there, and I wanted to develop staff that can operate without Lori and I. But Karen is kind of permanently there. She has 4 kids. They're Zambian. I don't know if she'll ever come back home. She has become our chief administrator. And we talk with our staff there every day. We have a WhatsApp where it's free, goes over the internet. We can video chat, phone, text. We do email. I do Zoom meetings with the Bible's teachers every week. I have them working through some video classes that I've bought for them. They watch them, and then once a week for about an hour or two, I have a Zoom meeting where I'm doing continuing education with the teachers there, developing the teachers, because I want Zambians teaching Zambians. So anyway, Karen has kind of become our chief administrator. We talk with her nonstop all the time. We know what's going on in Zambia all the time. In fact, sometimes I joke I find out what's going on one side of the campus before they know on the other side of campus. It's amazing. But anyway, Karen, her real passion, though, is the children. And we noticed that half the children in Africa die before they're 12 years old. And when we started looking at that more closely, we realized it's really happening in the first 2 or 3 years of their life. And the reason is because if something happens to the mother, if the mother dies in childbirth or soon after, which is still very common in Africa, or if the mother is too malnourished, and remember Zambia is the most malnourished country in Africa. So if the mother's too malnourished and she can't adequately nurse that baby, that baby's in trouble because they don't have cows. They can't afford cows. They can't afford cow's milk. They can't afford baby formula. They don't have another substitute. And some of the mothers, 25% of the mothers of Zambia have HIV. And if they nurse their child, which is their only option, and they're going to do that, then there's a 25% chance they pass that virus to that child. And that child's going to, with malnutrition and HIV, it'll quickly go to AIDS, and that child will be dead in 3 to 5 years. So what Karen does is she identifies, and she has more mothers that she could help than we have money. But she has a network, and people tell her mothers who are having problems nursing their children or who have HIV, and she will provide baby formula to those mothers or to the family if the mother is dead, up to 2 years. So that will save, it literally saves the life of those children. And I mean, there's just umpteen numbers of children whose lives that she has saved with $45, $50 a month, which is the cost of the baby formula. And she does other things as well, several things. I get caught up here with my slides.
David,
yeah.
What more can we do? I'm burdened by what you're telling us.
Well, Zambia is among the poorest countries of the world. We're in a very poor country, and because of heavily socialistic policies of the past, because they kind of were Marxist, pro-Russia back, in the Cold War, they still have all that socialistic stuff, and businesses just aren't thriving in Zambia, and it's just keeping them at the bottom. By the way, we just had an election a week ago, and we have a new president. We'll see what he does. Just a different sort of corruption is what we'll get, but we have hope. But anyway, Zambia is not a business-friendly country, and they have to import everything. They're not manufacturing and exporting hardly anything. They're landlocked. They're not near the sea, which increases transportation costs, so they can't compete with the world. It's just they're really in a bad shape economically. And by the way, in the last year, the kwacha's lost half of its value because they're now so in debt to the Chinese. So they can't even pay their interest on their loan that they own. So Zambia is in trouble, and it's getting worse. And thank goodness, though, I have to say the last political party that was voted out was very corrupt. And so we do have hope that the new president and it's a different party that has tried to push for more integrity in the past. We have some hope. But what can you do? It's just giving money to help buy baby formula. I mean, there's no end to the number of kids that Karen can put on her list to help with children. So she provides baby formula for up to 2 years for those children. She also will provide medical assistance, especially if it's some of the children that she is helping. And if they get sick and need medicine or need to go to the hospital or need an operation, sometimes she just hears from children who really need some medical assistance. And if she has the money, she will help with that. She'll take them to the hospital, actually, because in Zambia you take a kid to the hospital and you ignore them unless you show them money. It's kind of pay before you get medical care in Zambia. So she will help with that. She also will help with children with special needs, especially buying them certain equipment. And we did finish our children's care facility, which will allow us to hold up to about 30 babies. We don't believe in long-term orphan care because Africa they have extended families, and when the parents die, those children become the responsibility of the extended family. And that's kind of a duty, and they have a built-in way to handle. So we don't think that it's not good to raise kids in an institution anyway, and we don't want to do for Africans what Africans can do for themselves. What we can do, though, is temporary assistance, because sometimes the families are just not able to take in an infant suddenly like that, and they need a little time to prepare, or at least get the child past the 2-year weaning process where they can eat solid foods. So we have built this care facility, and we're needing to raise the money to hire the staff, because this is going to be labor intensive, because you have to have 2-3 people 24 hours a day. That's 3 shifts. What is that? 12, 14 people. So it's kind of labor, and we're a little unsure, how we're going to get the money for that. We're trusting God will provide as we go forward. But if you want to help kids, this is a great way to help a lot of kids with a very little money. I don't think you can get more bang for your dollar than anywhere in the world, because we can do so much good with such little money, and it makes a big difference because they're just so poor. It goes a long way in Africa. So those are some of the things with Karen's kids. I'm going to throw up a few recent pictures of some babies that Karen has helped. And if you're getting our newsletter, I put these pictures and a little story about them, more detail in our newsletter, email newsletter that I sent out. And I want you to look at this baby. This baby's fat. I want to tell you what, you don't see kids that look like this in Africa, or at least in Zambia. A fat baby. It's because he's on baby formula, he's healthy. They all look scrawny, and you just see this kid and it's like, whoo, almost looks abnormal because he's on baby formula and is healthy. So that's the ministry we're doing with kids, and we just help as many kids as we have money to help kids. That's just the bottom line. Now let me talk about the primary school. It is our primary ministry because, ultimately the problems of Africa are spiritual. It's a bottomless pit to try to help people who are poor. The real solution is a spiritual need. So we have the primary school, a Bible college. Now we have 3 classrooms, and I'm sorry I got to talk in there and it flipped through them all. Let me back up. We have 3 classrooms. All right. Well, there's a small classroom. I showed you a picture a second ago. Then we have this large auditorium. It's 110 feet long by 50 feet wide. And we can do combined classes in there. We do chapel, Sunday worship, and we're going to start doing lectureships, trying to bring back our past graduates for a special week of encouraging them and giving them some more teaching. And then we have a small classroom that is in our new office building that we recently built. So we have those 3 classrooms, and we're just starting this week probably. We will start construction on a classroom for the women because our women's program, they need their own classroom as well. We have 30 married student apartments. They're just simple 3-room houses. They don't have indoor toilets or indoor plumbing or kitchens. That's outside because we don't want to increase their standard of living. Our students come from the bush and we want them to go back to the bush. We don't want to ruin them by giving them conveniences that they can't get out in the bush. And even these houses, I built them as raunchy as I could build them, raunchy, is that the word? As low standard as I could, and the building commission approve it because I don't want to raise their standard of living. So we have these 30 married students. We also have a dorm that I built about a year ago, finished it, and because we do now have a few single students, although I want mainly married students. So with the housing, we have capacity for, with the students and their wives, capacity for about 90 to 100 students that we have capacity for. We've had over 600 that have graduated through our training program over these 17 years. And the last 3 graduating classes were the best that we ever had graduate. The spiritual demeanor and the quality of these students in the last 3 graduating classes have been good. In fact, the class that graduated this past November was the best ever, the men and the wives. It just feels like it took us a while to get it right, but it feels like we kind of got together a program that's effective, and it just feels that way. Our mission statement is that we're there to train and develop self-supporting spiritual leaders who are equipped for holistic rural ministry. Now, I'm telling you, this mission statement very much defines exactly what we're doing. And I evaluate how effective we are by whether we are accomplishing this mission statement. So I'm going to break it down as I go forward. But the most important statement in this mission statement is that we're there to develop spiritual leaders. That's really the bottom line. If we don't do anything else right, I want to make sure we develop spiritual men to be leaders in the church. We're not trying to produce preachers, full-time preachers. That's more of a Western phenomenon. In poor countries like Africa, they can't afford full-time guys. They don't need full-time preachers running around. They need leaders who can support themselves, but they need to be spiritual. There's a difference between church leaders and spiritual leaders. There ought not to be, but there is. You can train a lot of church leaders, and we have. But training spiritual leaders, that's whole nother ball game. And that is, if anything else we don't do right, we want to make sure we do this right. I'm more concerned with who they are than what they know. All right? I'm more concerned with their character and their relationship to God and their ethical lives. So we're talking here about spiritual formation. And I have spent probably more time trying to figure out how to do spiritual formation than anything I've tried to figure out in my life. And why is that, you say? Why is spiritual formation your number one priority above everything? Let me explain the situation in Zambia. 85% of Zambians claim to be Christians. Now, I don't mean a lot, but they claim to be Christians. It's not changing the way they're behaving, but they're claiming to be Christians now. 85%. You may not be aware of this, but there are more people that attend church in Africa now than attend church in all of North America and Europe combined. And not just by a little bit. 2 to 1. Twice as many people. Now, Islam is not moving and making any inroads into sub-Saharan Africa, because sub-Saharan Africa is done gone Christian, big time. Twice as many people are going to church in Africa. And then you may not be aware of this, but there are more members of the Church of Christ in Africa than there are now here in the United States. And this is why you hear people talking about that the global South, that Christianity has now become a religion of the global South. It's moved from the West to the Southern Hemisphere. That's where the gravitational center has shifted. And by the way, that doesn't happen with any other religion. It's never happened. Christianity can move the center of it because it's for all men. That's one lesson from that. But it's a global South is where it has migrated. That is where the center is now. Now, one of the things that you'll see is that in Africa we have a lot of people now claiming to be Christian, but it's still very anemic. It's profession of faith without not much transformation yet. Why is that? Well, let me give you 3 reasons. First of all is the fact that Christianity has really only been in Africa for about 75 years since World War II. Now, it's been there a lot longer than that, but it was after World War II that boom, it just exploded. Christian growth just exploded. It's amazing the amount of growth that's happened. And one of the reasons is because of all the missionaries Americans and Europeans have been sending to Africa since World War II. It's worked. It's exploded. But it's only been there 75 years, really. Now, how long have we had here in the Western world? Christianity has been here, what, about 2,000 years? Well, I'm glad we have perfected it. Sarcasm. They got 75 years, right? So, my point, give them a break. It's just, it's new. Another thing is we're dealing with the African worldview. You see, in Africa, they're not secular at all. The opposite is true for them. To them, what is happening to us in this physical world is because of the spirit world. The spirit world is controlling and affecting what is happening here in our world. And so they're very much focused on the spirit world. So when bad things are happening to you, it's because, the ancestors are upset with you, or spirits or demons, or just spirit power has turned against you, or someone has gone and put a curse on you. And that's why bad things are happening to you. So the way you deal with that is you go to the witch doctor. And the witch doctor, like any doctor, is going to first diagnose what is causing your problem. He may throw some bones on the ground. He may read tea leaves in the bottom of the cup, or if you pay him extra money, like an MIR, he'll kill a chicken and pull the guts out, and apparently the color of the guts tells him something. But anyway, he's going to tell you, well, an ancestor's upset with you, you've been ignoring them, or somebody's put a curse on you, and so he's going to diagnose your problem. The next thing is he's then going to give you a prescription of what to do about it. You need to go make this sacrifice, or you need to do this ritual, or you need to take... He especially wants to sell you medicine because he gets more money from selling you his medicine. Like all doctors, they want to give you medicine. So he's learned from the Western doctors, he's going to give you his medicine. But it's not the herbs or what's physical properties of the medicine. It is the spirit power that witch doctor supposedly has put into that medicine. You see, if you go to a Western doctor, and Africans do, because they know Western medicine is very good at treating the symptoms of what ails you. Western medicine is very powerful with dealing with the physical symptoms. But Western medicine does not deal with the spirit cause. Because what's causing your illness is in the spirit world, not physical. It's like you get a virus. You know, a doctor can give you medicine to treat the symptoms, but he can't give you medicine that's going to cure the virus. So that's the problem with Western medicine. It just deals with the symptoms. And Western medicine can cure the symptoms, but it can't deal with the cause. And so if you don't deal with the cause of what's causing your problems, it'll just come back in another way. So the witch doctor, they'll go to the Western doctor to get medicine and then go to the witch doctor to deal with the cause, the root of the problem. And he'll give them spirit medicine that will help deal with the problem. Because you see, Western medicine is secular. It doesn't deal with the spiritual world. So that's the worldview that they're working with. Now, when they become a Christian, do you think that worldview just kind of, okay, now let's accept a Western worldview? They don't do that. They just simply take that pagan worldview and put Christianity on top of that, and we get what's called syncretism. So what happens is African basically, when he becomes a Christian, he will say, well, I'll go to church and do this or that because it will make God happy with me, and if God is happy with me, He'll bless me here and now in the physical world. And so I see Africans, I've noticed this since I first went to Africa in the 80s. I've always heard this. Africans walk out of church, and they'll go, God is going to bless me. And I always say, well, why do you say that? Well, because I went to church today, and we put money in the collection plate, and we took the Lord's Supper, and we didn't sing with an instrument. God is happy with me. He's going to bless me. And I say, yeah, but what about this woman you're seeing that ain't your wife? Or what about, you're dishonest in your business, and everybody in the village knows it. Or you lie, or you got a drinking problem, any number of things. Yeah, but I went to church, and God is going to bless me. It's like if I show God it's like they treating God like they do the other spirit beings. If I get them happy with me, then they can bless me. Well, that's the problem we're dealing with. And what they don't understand is that becoming a Christian involves a life transformation. It does affect the way you treat your wife or your neighbor and your ethical conduct and your character integrity. They don't understand that Christianity deals with that because they're used to a mechanistic worldview instead of a worldview that affects the way we live every day of our life. So that's the challenge that we're having. They don't yet have that Christian worldview very well. And then another thing that we've had a problem with, the third thing, is we missionaries, not just Church of Christ, but across the board here, we've just really not done a good job of training spiritual leaders. We have run them through our Bible colleges and gave them a lot of information, and they became church leaders, but we didn't deal with their character and their spiritual life, and we just didn't drill down deep enough. So I've talked to a lot of denominational leaders and missionaries, and I keep hearing the same thing. Our leaders are corrupt or immoral. They don't really, their ethical lives are immoral. They're corrupt and poorly trained, and they're preaching the gospel of prosperity. The gospel of prosperity is that from that 2 Corinthians 9 passage, you reap what you sow. If you give to the Lord bountifully, then the Lord is going to bless you. And you hear that if you turn on the TV here Sunday morning. You're going to hear preachers preaching that gospel here. And that's very popular in Africa. If you go to church and do this or that, then God's going to bless you. And especially if you put money in the collection plate. Because in Africa, they can't afford to pay their preachers. And so the preachers preach this all the time. Every Sunday, you're going to hear about giving and giving to the Lord because the preachers want money. They're starving to death. We trained a bunch of guys, and the churches can't afford them. So they're very tempted to preach money, 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 money. And if you don't give it to them, they'll just embezzle it from the church treasury. So these are some of the problems that we've had because I don't think we've done a good job of developing spiritual leaders for the churches. So as I started realizing these problems in Africa, I realized that I've got to shift from missions is not about church planning. Missions about making disciples. And after all, isn't that what Jesus said? Go make disciples. He didn't say go plant churches. I don't measure success in places like Africa by the number of people you baptize and how many churches you start. Because I realized a long time ago I can go just about any village in Africa and I can preach for 2 weeks and baptize a bunch of people and plant a church, but it doesn't mean I've made one disciple. And if I want to make a disciple, I got to go and stay there for 2 or 3 years and work with a person to develop him spiritually. It takes time. It takes a relationship. But going on short-term missionary and doing a bunch of campaigning stuff doesn't get the job done. It's not about how many baptisms and church plantings. It's about whether you have made disciples. So I shifted that, and I realized if we're going to make disciples in Africa, we've got to train spiritual leaders who can make disciples. It takes disciples to make disciples. That's why I came down to realizing that spiritual formation is the most important thing that we can do. Well, the next big question, and this is what has taken me it didn't take me long to figure out the problem. Now, what's the solution? How do you do spiritual formation? I was shocked by how little, 14 years ago, how little I could find on this subject. Now, there's a lot more out there now, but I've been working at this for 14 years. How do you develop spiritual leaders? And let me just add, developing spiritual leaders is the same thing as making disciples. And I want to tell you, we need to get back to doing this here in this country, making disciples instead of churchgoers. And I think that's what's wrong with the church in America and why it's declining so quick, so fast. We've not done a good job of making disciples. We have a lot of people coming to church, but we've not done a good job of making disciples in this country. So how do you do spiritual formation? Well, I don't have time to get into all this, and I'm running out of time, so I got to hit this real quick. Several things I did, first of all, is totally overhauled our program in 2015. When we moved to our new campus at Daybreak, I had a better campus and I could start over. And instead of building dorms, I built married student apartments. We had a 2-year program for 10 years, but when we moved to our new campus, we went to a 3-year training program. And I said, I want to get married students. In fact, I want to see that 75% of our students are married. And they have to come with their wives because the women have to go through our training program. If their wife doesn't come, they can't come and stay and go through our program. I want to train the wives as well. And I want them there. I want married men. They're more stable. And I want them a little older than we've had in the past. I want them at least in their 30s. And I want to see that they're already engaged in ministry. They're not talking about it, but they already have a passion for serving God and they're already doing it. And I want to get recommendations from their home congregation that they're a quality person worth training. And so as a result, we have a better quality of student coming in to start with. You know, junk in, junk out. You increase your quality of material, you're going to be able to produce a better quality. And then we are training them for a longer period of time. The second big thing I had to do is to develop a teaching staff. And so we have the best teaching staff in our Bible college that we've ever had. I have a director and I have a dean of students. I have a older man who does the practical ministry training, taking the students off actually doing ministry. We also have 2 men that are focused on the spiritual formation because that's our most important part of our training. So we have 2 guys that are focused on that. I also have an agriculture teacher, and 2 of the wives of our teachers are working with the women's program. And they have just really done a fantastic job working with the wives. So what is your curriculum? This is the part that really got hard. How do you do this? And I don't have time to go through this. I have a whole sermon on this, by the way. And I've had a bunch of people tell me I need to write a book on this because I've been working on this for 12, 14 years. And I'm going to tell you what, I think we need to be doing that here in America. But I'll save that for another time when I come to visit. I'll share that with you. But we have designed our program to accomplish that. Now, boy, I got to hurry. So we want not only to train spiritual leaders, which is the number one priority, but we want them to be self-supporting. We don't want them to be a burden to the churches or being tempted to preach about money all the time. We want them to be able to support themselves. And the way we do that is teaching them in agriculture. That's why I have an agriculture teacher. And we teach them how to do drip irrigation, compost, basic agriculture. You know, in Zambia it doesn't rain but 4.5 months out of the year, and then not a drop for 7.5 months. But if you can get water, you can grow vegetables and all year round. And this is very important in Zambia because they're so malnourished. They need to grow fresh vegetables year round, and because you know in the dry season they don't get much fresh vegetables. It's all dried and you know bring it back, pound it up and cook it in water, the corn. But getting fresh vegetables, especially vegetables that are high in protein like beans and certain other things that are high in nutrition. This is very important to the students' health, and so we're trying to, and helps them also to be self-supporting. Now the problem is water, because they have to walk 2 or 3 miles to get their 2 or 3, 4, 5 miles to get water. But if they can fill 4 of these buckets each day, then they can grow enough vegetables to feed their family and even sell some for a good price in the dry season. So we're teaching them how to do this drip irrigation. We're also teaching them how to raise chickens, because they can make some money growing chickens. That also provides some protein that they need. Now, we not only want our students to be able to support themselves, but we want them to be able to do holistic ministry. Because in Africa, you can't just deal with the spiritual church stuff on Sunday. You know, if you're in Africa, if your religion doesn't help you with the here and now, it's useless, because Africans don't think about the future. They're engaged in daily survival, and if you don't deal with the physical, you know, it's useless. So we can't ignore. And besides that, Jesus came preaching and healing. Jesus' ministry was holistic. He responded not only to the spiritual needs of people, but also to the physical needs of people. So we're trying to teach our students how to do holistic ministry. And one thing is, when our students learn agriculture, when they go back to the village, they'll be able to teach the people in the village how to do drip irrigation and basic agriculture and crop rotation and different kinds of vegetables that you can grow in the dry season. And that is going to be very helpful to dealing with the malnutrition in Africa. You know, all these big fancy things that USAID and UN do in agriculture in Africa are kind of worthless, because you got to develop low-tech, self-supporting, reproducible kinds of agriculture for Africans, and that's why we're teaching the agriculture that we're doing. We're also teaching our students and their wives how to be a school teacher by giving them practical experience teaching in our primary school. We get our students and they teach classes in our primary school. We want them to learn how to do that. We want them not only to do the secular part, but also how to do the spiritual, working with children in their spiritual lives. We're also teaching our students how to work with vulnerable children, because they get practical experience working with Karen and Karen's kids, learning to work with children who are vulnerable, because when they go back to the village, we want to get them to try to help organize their church or the village to respond to all the children that are in their village that are very vulnerable and malnourished and die young. So this is a very important ministry, teaching them, and Karen helps teach the students how they can care for children. We're also teaching our students basic medicine, especially preventive medicine. And we're teaching them about marriage and the family, because they've gone from arranged marriages to love marriages. Arranged marriages, they didn't have any expectations. Now they want love and romance, and they want to choose who they're going to marry. But the thing is if you want love and romance, you got to learn some relational skills. And they hadn't learned them yet. I mean, men still treat women like they're a cow, a piece of property. They beat their wives. They don't do what they want. That doesn't tend to create good relationships and marriages. So we trying to teach them basic relational skills. And those relational skills come right out of the Bible. All of them. So we're teaching a lot on marriage and the family. Not teaching them to be counselors so much as just how to build good marriages, mostly preventive stuff. So when you look at this, you see that we're trying to train our students in holistic ministry. They can do the spiritual, and they can respond to the physical needs of people. We have other ministries that I don't have time to get into. One I do want to mention right quick is our Optical Clinic. We had a brother in Amarillo who donated money for us to buy a very nice, expensive part. Oh, I am in Amarillo. And this is the church. I always say this everywhere I go. I tell people about this. We are able to, this machine will read people's eyes. It will print out a prescription, and we can then match them with donated eyeglasses and give people a pair of eyeglasses, prescription eyeglasses. Not only reading glasses, but prescription glasses as well. And it's a very low-cost ministry. We don't do it all the time. We do it mainly when Lori is in Zambia. But I wish I had time, but I don't, to get into talking about stories of this is so cheap, and yet it makes such a big difference in people's lives when you give people who have never been able to see very well a pair of glasses. Like one guy, we gave him glasses, he's in the 70s, and he looked around and he says, "Oh, the leaves have trees on. The trees have leaves on them." Or the older couple, we gave a pair of glasses, and he's in his 70s. He looked over at his wife. He goes, "Oh, I have married a beautiful woman." And I thought, boy, it's a little late to find out now. And honestly, she didn't look that hot to me, but I was half thinking he'd say, "Y'all just keep the..." No. That was a funny story. They just went down the road dancing and singing. Boy, it's like curing the blind. That's the funnest ministry. Is that a word? Funnest ministry that we have. But anyway, so we have, you see, we're not only teaching our students to do holistic ministry, but we as a ministry, Daybreak, we are also doing holistic ministry. So we minister to the physical and the spiritual needs of people. As I said, the Bible College is the primary ministry that we have. Most of the money that is supporting the spiritual part of our ministry is coming from churches. Unless churches say otherwise, the money that churches give us goes to the spiritual side of our ministry. But we have folks, mainly individuals, who are contributing. In this church, you are specifically said, we want to help Karen's kids. And so, but unless people tell us, especially, most of it's from individuals who want to help people, poor people in Africa. And when they do, that's when it goes to that to the humanitarian side of our ministry. So how can you help? There's brochures back there you can pick up, where it's buying baby formula or the primary school or whatever. There's a lot of ways. And the last thing I want to mention, because I'm out of time, is we did start an endowment fund 2 years ago. I'm 64 years old. I have no plans to retire. I don't know how many more years Lord will give me, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. But there will be a day when my expiration date will come. I keep looking to see where it is, but I can't find it. It's invisible, I guess. But anyway, however the Lord gives me, because, you know, I have, honestly, the ministry in Zambia now can kind of operate. It's getting to where more and more it can operate without me. I still am needed to do a lot of the oversight and directing and watching the finances, but I'm working myself out of that role too, slowly, with Karen. But the side I can't find anyone to take over, replace myself, is the part of fundraising, because if somebody doesn't keep going and visiting the churches and telling them about the work, the funds will start to dry up. So that's why we're worried about what happens when something happens to me. So I don't know why I waited until 2 years ago. I should have started this 15 years ago, an endowment fund, because all colleges have them. But so we're asking folks to consider contributing to our endowment fund. We're taking the money, we're investing it in mutual funds, so that one day when I'm gone, there will be funds that will help support this ministry and give it life beyond my lifetime. They tell me I need to raise $3 or $4 million. That's a lot of money, but I don't know, maybe God will provide in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But anyway, we're going to do what we can and then trust God to provide. But if folks want to consider contributing to our endowment fund, there's a brochure back there that talks about that, estate planning or IRAs or whatever. But if you want to consider that, because, you know, I and our supporters have invested a lot in developing this ministry. And a lot of my time and a lot of money has gone into developing. And it's like in the last 5 years, it's really working beautifully. And I'd like to see this ministry continue for as long as possible. And I'll close with this last statement. You know, Africans are telling me one day, because I hear what's going on in America, and they're telling me more and more every day I hear it. One day we're going to be sending missionaries to America. And you know, I'm afraid they may be true. Our great-great-grandchildren may have missionaries coming from Africa to reseed the gospel here, the way things are going in this country right now. I just wish they didn't say it so cocky. You know, one day we're going to be sending missionaries to America. It kind of stabs me a little bit, but I'm also very thankful that they feel that way. And let me tell you what, you know, only about 4% of Europe goes to church on Sunday now. Only about 4%. If you took France out, it'd be almost zero. But let me tell you what, Africans are moving to Europe in large numbers, because if you know about the birth dearth in Europe, the white traditional European population is not replacing themselves, and they don't have anyone that wants to be the nurses and and do, yard work and do the social services and service jobs. And so they're bringing them in from Asia, Syrians and Muslims, but they're bringing huge numbers of Africans into Europe. And guess what? They're planting churches all over Europe now. Now, if you've been to Europe, you know you go into a church in Europe, big cathedrals, man, they're beautiful. If you've been there, they're nothing but museums. There's no church there anymore. But if you'll walk out of those cathedrals and walk around the block or two, you'll find in some shopping center a church that an African has started. They're reseeding Christianity in Europe now. And one day they may be doing it here too. So we'll be very thankful that we have planted the gospel. My concern is I just want to make sure they develop spiritually. And that's what our main focus on. Well, I'm out of time, but I just want to close by thanking the congregation here. Just thank you so much for helping us to make a difference in Africa, because I believe that's where the Spirit is really working now, and they're receptive. And right now is the time to work hard while it is day before the night comes. Thank you all for helping